Okay, I'm recording. Still good, right?
So good.
All right, perfect. So I am going to introduce you if that's okay. Okay, let me know if any of this stuff is right or wrong.
I
Okay, I
will.
just want to make sure I got everything right. I had to do my research about Aaron. So hey everyone who might be watching this.
Hello.
This is Christiana, and I'm with Aaron Hill. And I'm going to introduce Aaron really quickly. Aaron attends the University of Toledo College of Law, where he serves as the Student Bar Association president, the second person to ever hold the title. He is a note and comment editor for the Toledo Law Review, and his article titled Putting Police in the Paddy Wagon, Analysis of the Difficulties of Prosecuting Police and Proposed Solutions will be published by that journal in 2022. He's an alumnus of the University of Pittsburgh and a former member of that school's William Pitt Debating Union. So, is that right? Did you want to add anything else?
Oh, that's perfectly fine. But to say, I mean, you want to know how we know each other, through
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah, organizations. I might talk to you about that afterwards. Thanks for being here again. Like, I really appreciate it because I was really thinking this is okay. So this is just a topic that I thought of randomly. I was sitting in my room, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about debating. So just for some background, I know that Aaron is a debater because I interviewed him and his teammates through the William Pitt Debating Union, maybe not 2 years, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, about right that long. Yeah.
Yeah, for an article that I did for the University of Pittsburgh Alumni Magazine. So that's how I knew, and I was familiar with their competition. And they did the Pittsburgh City debate, I think is what it was called, and won. So I got to see that. It was really cool. But even though I thought it was cool then, I've had some distance from it, and I'm like, what? Okay, I personally don't know if I would like to engage in debate as a way to learn things. It just seems really confrontational to me. And I never thought that that's a way that I could learn, right? But I wanted to speak with you because I'm totally open to having my mind changed about that. I always thought that being in grad school, I just graduated from Temple in May. That made me a more critical thinker because I had to read a lot. But we didn't really debate a lot or argue a lot. So I was just like, what's the point? And why is this a valuable thing? So I was just curious about that. And I was like, oh, let's see if I could talk to Aaron. So that's why he's here today. And like I said, I'm really willing to learn and see why it's like a valuable thing to do. So I wanted to start off by asking you what your definition of debate is or how you perceive it.
A fundamental question we ask ourselves all the time in the debate world. So what is debate? I would say debate ultimately is always about discourse, and it can be about any topic, any area. It can be about, what's the weather going to be tomorrow versus politics of who should be the next president. Debate is always going to be about, it can be varied depending on what forms you want it to look like. It can be performative. For example, I know some debaters who do it through poems or through interpretation of theaters or plays. I know those who do it through policy decisions. They present evidence of facts or knowledge that they have and present that to everyone who's involved or to the person they're debating. And it can vary from different forms and, procedures and the rules of debate. But the ultimate core of debate will always be discourse. It's always about sharing and exchanging ideas between one another for the hope that we can either grow on our beliefs or to change each other's mind. So that's how I've seen debate. I don't think my view of debate has changed or definition of it's changed since I was in undergrad when I first met Christy, and it's about the same now as a law student as it goes.
Perfect. Okay, you touched on a lot of things that I was going to ask you about, but I want to kind of get into your journey into debate first, kind of give everyone perspective. I don't know anything about it either, so to give me perspective as well. So what drew you to it and who kind of inspired you to, if anyone did?
So I have the full back my memory logs for this one. So I first became interested in debate in high school, funny enough. And I think what drew me to debate is I always knew it was a competitive environment. It was always a prestigious environment, right? You see in the movies that those who know how to debate become great politicians, become these great preachers. They become these great people who engage in debate. And I was like, I kind of want to understand what that world looks like. And I can tell you the first story of how I got into my debate team. So I looked online or a high school handbook about who's a debate advisor. And I walked to her classroom, and I was a freshman at the time. And she, of course, doesn't know me from the moon to any other of her students. And I'm like,
that Pitt, right?
huh?
Is that Pitt?
No, this was at high school.
Oh.
My undergrad story still have the same experience, but I came up to my high school teacher and I was like, are you the debate coach? How do I do it? And she looked at me, she stared at me for a good 10 seconds. It was like, show up on Monday. And that was my first entry into the debate world. And so I loved it in high school, kept going into tournaments and enjoyed from there. In undergrad, I thought I would quit debate, because debate turns into a more serious environment in college, because instead of in high school debate, you're talking about one topic that you're set on for the year. In college, it can literally change in a month, in a week, and you have to prep your knowledge and do things for that. And so how I walked onto the undergraduate team was freshman year of undergrad. I walked up, found out where they were, where their offices were and their meetings were. And I told the coach, how do I do competitive debate? Same thing, show up tomorrow and meet the team. And usually they would train you for your first tournament, but they put me on their first tournament in like my first week. And my mind was still blown, and I loved it still since. So.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know you started in high school. So I'm going to have these questions apply to high school and, undergrad. But can you just talk about kind of like the basics of being on a debate team, right? What kind of debate did you do? When I was doing my research, I saw that there were all kinds of debates, which I didn't know formats of debates. So like I noticed that the William Pitt Debating Union kind of did like policy debate and maybe public debate. I wasn't sure if the same was for you in high school, but like what kind of format did you all do? Was there something you were more drawn to?
So I've done a few different styles of debate. As you've noted, I've done policy debate, through the debate union and high school. I did Lincoln Douglas debate more in high school than I did in undergrad. And then I do public debate. So public debate, to identify what each style is, policy debate is competition almost style of debate of a certain policy. So for example, let's say the resolution is, should the United States fund NASA again? And so policy debate is bringing up facts of the benefits of funding NASA versus the detriment. Benefits is we can explore space, we have a better life as humanity. Negative is it costs too much. And so it's always about presenting different facts, and they clash with each other. Be like, well, no, it doesn't cost this much, it costs. And so policy debate is always about the facts and the crux of one resolution, about one policy, and if it's good or bad. Lincoln Douglas is more about emotion and appeal. It's more about morality per se. For example, morality for Lincoln Douglas is civil disobedience, right? Are the protests during the civil rights era justified? Are all kinds of disobedience, protests like that always justified? Is it? And that's moral, right? Because you can't, it becomes between difference of opinion, of difference of beliefs, of right, of, well, protests are unjustified in all experiences, or ours are like, well, if there's a good cause. Others are like, well, in certain ways, like you can't block a road or things like that. It becomes morality. And then public debate, I also like that. I was the public debate captain for the William Pitt Union. It's all about getting your points across to the public. How do you express your ideas and the things that you want to general people? And can you change their minds? Some people come into debates with their strict beliefs, right? I am staunchly this way. I staunchly believe taxes are bad. Public debate questions of audience on what their current beliefs are. 2, are you somewhat moved either more or against where you currently were than when you started the debate? And 3, what do you think a judge would do? You think in competitive, who you think won the debate generally? Who was just a better presenter of all the arguments? Each style of debate, has their own pros and cons. But you asked me, first off, I keep speaking, I know, about what a debate team is like. So a debate team is a very niche pod of people who are very opinionated. And they can be either, opinionated on one thing about their favorite TV show or about policies in general. And how debate teams work is there's a squad, which is basically all the members of the debate team that the coach believes needs to be on it. And then you are paired typically with one partner. Most schools keep you as your partner for the rest of your debate career. You can almost call it marriage almost in the debate team world, because they want you, when you first start off, to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, right? I know, and my partner knew, I pull on heartstrings. I know what words to say. I know how to be big when it counts. So my partner, in the contrary, his debate style became more logical and cold-hearted of like, these are the facts. These are the things you need to know, right? And so usually I would go first to catch attention of the public or people of like, wow, I'm really interested in this topic. And my partner would just lay it out. These are the exact details that you are all wondering. Like, what does this look like? How do we fund it? He flushes that all out for the audience. And typically that's how our rounds go. And other teams have completely different styles. So like one's the screaming one and one's the quiet one. Or one in performative debate, if they choose to have a performative style, one per se is crying actually, and the other's not saying a word. There's different ways people and debaters can use their styles. And I would say the debate team world and the debate world is very diverse in its own right, and just on the viewpoints that it has.
Okay, so it's interesting. So I didn't know that you got a partner. I thought it was like everyone in the team is working together. So how often do you all work together?
How often? So we can switch partners depending on a tournament, right? If we think it's best for competition or best for that debate, we will switch our partners up necessarily, but you usually have a main partner that knows your style more than anyone else in the squad. And so how you work with the rest of the squad, depends on the topic, or it does practice rounds, right? There may be your teammates, but they can also be your best opponents because they know you a little bit more because they work with you all the time. Mm-hmm. So I remember when I first joined the debate union, there's this one upperclassman I hated the most because he always knew how to counter me. And it infuriated me that I would say these things, but I know where you're going with this argument. And so he knew exactly my thought process before I could even get there. And it infuriated me, but it made me grew as a debater and got me closer to my team because he knows where I'm going. And then that preps me to think 2 steps ahead of him, like chess, right? I know he knows where I'm going to move my next piece. I need to either distract him or throw him off his game. And so the squad becomes a family almost because you're exchanging ideas. You're learning about each other's principles almost. Some are liberal, some are conservative, but you have a value for each other because you are finding a way to advocate it for the best of your position and for the best of you. And that makes us stronger as a squad and as a community.
Nice. And so it sounds like when you were describing the different, styles of debate, it sounds like different modes of information or maybe ways of conveying information are prioritized depending on the style, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know if there was a place for, say, storytelling and debate, if objective knowledge, and by objective knowledge, I kind of mean just like to be objective basically is to aspire to knowledge that bears no trace of the knower, which is the meaning of objective that I recently learned. I was like, oh, that's good. Mm-hmm. No, kind of personal connection, just presenting information to you. So yeah, what do you think is usually more prioritized? I know you said it depends on style, but
I would say
facts across even with that story. Do you have to
I would say, and I hate this, I would say it almost depends, what is the message that you're trying to get across? For example, I mentioned policy debate is more fact focused, but I remember this time in a tournament, I had another team because the policy was about, should we fund certain neighborhoods? Should we fund high affluent neighborhoods? And she presented this anecdote and stories about herself and her friends about the effects she felt from gentrification. She said, my mom was worried that my rent was getting higher. We didn't know how we were going to pay. We didn't know how we were going to stay there. And landlords being more predatory, right? These aren't facts. I mean, these are personal experiences. These aren't like things I can prove through a scientific method or things like that. This is someone's story. And these are other people's story. And it's being used to strike down a policy. And I think in itself, that can also be powerful. Now, certain people, you got to think your audience to me in some form, fashion, right? Some people are more receptive to facts. Other people don't like anecdotes. And so it's always, what is the message you're trying to get across? And I know in that round, when I was debating her, the round was, what are the effects of this policy on Black people? And she has changed the entire policy of like, we should fund lower income housing, to this is now a story about race. This is a story about how this impacts people. And it has shifted the conversation. And so the power in how you choose to debate will ultimately always shift the conversation. If I choose to care about people, if I choose to make the focus about people and their emotions and their stories, it's not about policy anymore. It's not about facts anymore. It becomes, what do we do? Now, facts can help, like, well, you know, there's this program that helps gentrification, but what does that do for what happened to her?
Yeah, yeah. Do you notice that that works with certain crowds? Because one thing, I don't know if you all are learning about critical race theory in law school, but but one, you know, tenet of critical race theory is kind of like this narrative storytelling, like making things stories so that people can understand them. And, you know, in a lot of communities of color, that's like a tradition, right? We make things stories. So if you're in a certain crowd, you sometimes shift your approach based on, you know, where you're going to be, or who you're going up against.
I would say I would do shift things so much. I know my style, more say, is getting that emotional appeal, but I think I need to know. Sometimes I don't really change my style. I just change the order of how I present things. For example, I just put the facts up front. And I'm like, these are why these facts matter, because there's a Black mom who can't afford to pay her rent today. Boom. This is why these facts matter, because there's a child going hungry on the street today. And so I can always change the order of how I present things in order to change the audience. For example, in a group of law students, lawyers are taught to be objective. And I will use the style I just described above. These are the facts. These are the impact. This is why your facts matter. If I want you to disregard my opponent's fact or the other party's facts, because they can't tell you a story of why everything they just said mattered. And so that changes the whole narrative of how things are looked at and how debate functions. Now, politics is the same way. They can tell you, politicians do all this time. They bring you this person they got a letter from the other day and said, this is their story. And this is why my policy matters. So they do the complete opposite. They're like, this is an average working American, and this is why reparations need to be passed. And so they sometimes change the style based on their audience. I mean, I'm still talking to the public. We have different ways of how we want to impact you at the end. And so the story of debate and always of storytelling, and I know this is like a child thing, is like, what's the takeaway? What's the end of the Aesop fable? Is it about more of the policy? Is it about what you want to change happen? Or is it about what is the current circumstances, what people are going through? Are people suffering? What I want you to take away that right now, people are suffering. And that may change your whole outlook of what you see things. Critical race theory in schools, or right now, and since you mentioned it up, these stories, right? How are Black people and people of color being affected right now? Right now, currently right now. These are the stories that critical race theory wants you to focus on. Now, other politicians, more conservative, or those who are still fighting for Black rights will say, well, Black people don't have access to education as much as other people. They don't have access to some housing as for other people. They don't have access to the same resources. So critical race theory is almost the same as what Black politicians are doing in Congress, but they're from a different mode. And some people don't like that because it brings emotions, right? Now I am forced to focus on the story of what's happening to my fellow American, and I don't like it. That has nothing to do with me, or, I can't really change that, or that's not my problem. That's what critical race theory sometimes will focus people to think about. And for some people, that's too powerful, that's too strong, or others, that's not how they want to receive their information.
Okay, interesting. Now you said for others, that's not how they want to receive their information. Have you ever experienced people not wanting to receive information from you because you're Black, maybe because of the way that you present? Like, have there ever been any kind of personal hard feelings that you've experienced from people, whether on another team or in the crowd, even on your own team? I don't know.
So I will say, there's one argument I think about in my debate time that really still kind of grinds my gears a little bit based on how it was presented. So I was facing, my partner was white at the time. My main partner, Pitt, was white. But I was facing a team that had two Black debaters. And so they had a very interesting argument of Black nihilism, basically saying that Black people and African Americans and people of color cannot trust the system at all. So why try to change it, right? We should focus on our spiritual growth, our family growth. Policies will always oppress Black people. Why should we give a damn? And so that stung. I hated that argument so much as a debater and as a Black person, because I'm like, I don't understand how you can tell us to lose hope. I don't understand why this is the argument you all want to make. And so I remember this debate round. I stopped giving facts in that debate round and I just went on a rant. I remember this completely. I went on a rant for 8 minutes. And I know, that's not, people don't think that's constructive. Funny enough, the judge thought it was, but some people don't think it's constructive. But to me, in that moment, I was trying to figure, I felt as I was being disqualified because I'm the Black person fighting for policy rights. I'm the Black person fighting for change. I'm fighting for getting more voting rights, things like that. I felt right, I'm at disqualified because you are the person, you are the Uncle Tom here, basically. Like, you are trying to fix a system that is ultimately going to oppress you. So you are part of the problem. You hurt Black rights. And I literally went on a rant of like, how dare you tell our people to give up hope? And I understand the importance of spiritual growth and building the family, but I cannot sit here personally, and I don't think our ancestors would sit here and let policies that oppress us let stand. Even though we could diverge our time to somewhere else, I could not, as a person, as a debater, as a moral person, let that exist. And so I went on a rant for that entire round. I lost that round. I knew I threw that round.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the outcome was.
But it was because in that space, it was a white judge deciding what was the fate of Black people. And so that whole thing, that whole round was just a hot mess in my brain. And like, to answer your original question, to me, that's where I felt ultimately disqualified, because they used my color against me in my own debate round. And this even exists in legal fields, for example. Some people just hire Black lawyers so they seem less racist. Police officers do this all the time. Like, you know what? This is my lawyer. I'm using his color as a weapon or as a shield for my defense. And so that changes his persuasiveness, how it runs in front of the judge, how it goes in front of, let's say, George Floyd. Let's say the police officer in Derek Chauvin had a Black attorney. The whole optics of the trial would have changed a little bit just because of, wow, he's got someone of color now on his side. And so in debate, you don't think about this, and it comes into society about what your identity does to your persuasiveness, what your identity does to your optics, into your speech, and how it, affects your credibility. But that's the takeaway.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay. So kind of going back to, talking about that team who did the Black nihilism thing. That seems kind of awkward. So, okay, this is kind of getting into what makes me a little bit uncomfortable about debate, right? I am, which isn't healthy, but I'm kind of a conflict avoidant person. I don't like conflict. And so if that had been me on the other side, right? Okay, so this team kind of says this, and then so you're saying that they actually like said to you, basically, like, you're basically from the situation, right? Like, those were okay. Yeah, I would be upset after the debate. So how do you deal with that? Like,
I would say I was very enraged. I remember that after that round, I didn't even want to hear the judge's decision. I just kind of walked out and then waited for them to call me back, because I was just like, I was done. So debate can be infuriating. I remember in high school, I had debates where I'm like, I was red hot angry. And so over the course, you're going to over debate, you're not a conflict person, but you're going to have, like you said, you're not conflict averse. Maybe it's not even you may have to not look at it as conflict. I mean, you just have to look at it as growth, right? You just felt like everything you stood for and everything you just faced was challenged. And you're like, you could feel like, I want to go, I either, like me, I'm like, I'm ready to keep fighting him on it. I'm ready to push forward. Or you like, I just want to back away from this. I want to switch the conversation. And that's very fair to do. But the question then becomes, what does that do for your growth, right? What does that do for that conflict, right? I had to think about Black nihilism from this day forward of what is its effects. Like, I still remember that debate because that came to me and how it made me feel. And that exists in all kinds of progress or things like someone can tell you, you know what, I think women deserve less rights. I think women have equal rights as they are. We don't need to push for more. Women are fine equally as we are right now. And that could offend you, right? You could say all of these statistics and facts, and they still could tell you, well, no, these things are wrong and disproven. And you're going to feel some type of way. You're going to feel like, wow, he just attacked my identity or attacked my ideas, and I don't know what to do. And what you got to take away from that is, okay, I'm faced with an idea. I'm going to calm down for a second, or you're going to wait a day, simmer off. I'm not saying enjoy your feelings, let them loose, do what you need to do in order to express them. But maybe a day or two later, what would you say now? What would you say now after you heard that argument? After you have time to process it, after you have time to recognize its effect on you, what would you say now? What would you say in a week? Me, what would I say now that I'm in law school? What would I say now to that argument? And it has helped me grow because now I know what happens when I'm in that position. I am exposed to these ideas. I know these ideas exist, and I'm ready to face them. And so for many people, just facing an idea they don't know about or that opposes them is a shock. Like, I don't understand how you can believe this. I don't get it. So always enjoy the shock, live in the shock of debate or with the idea you don't like, and then process it later, because that is for your growth. It's going to help you understand what other people see and why or not your ideas work or your views work.
And so I'm kind of going to put you on the spot. I mean, you don't have to answer, but just to, kind of use this example, because I think it's a good example. So, I mean, you were explaining what your response was to that Black nihilism, argument, right? Are there any kind of objective, points that you would add to that argument? I'm not sure if that's still your stance, like your response is still your stance, or what's your stance?
I mean, my stance still changes. I still not, for Black nihilism. I think instead of making the argument that, like policy-wise, Black policy has helped people, I think I would have came for a morality argument of more the so, because Black nihilism is an argument of like focus our energy and time somewhere else, spiritually, mentally, and philosophy-wise. The argument I probably would go is for like Afrofuturism, right? Why set generations to suffer? I mean, you may believe that spiritual growth and, believing in God or getting more in your faith is the answer, but to some people, that's not fulfilling. So you leave a whole set of people without help and oppression. And so in my mind, that has changed because I was fighting for policies, which is almost right into the argument they're saying, right? The more we fight for policies, the more we suffer, right? We fought against slavery, we got Jim Crow. We fought against Jim Crow, we got prison pipeline system. We got this and we got to that. Policy changes always lead to more or somewhat same oppression. And my argument would still be, like I told you now, right? Spiritual growth, the way you want to divert energy doesn't solve it for everyone. It doesn't. Some people are not going to be atheists, or some people will be atheists. Some people do not want to put their time in their family. Others want a career. Others want certain things more than you want. And so you leave a set of people who will be unfulfilled, and that is because of your thinking. That turns their whole argument around because they're like, oh, I actually hurt people by telling people what I want them to do, right? By my philosophy, I hurt another set of people that didn't need to be hurt or hurt more, or as we call in the debate world, a disad. You make a disadvantage from your action. And so I think that's how we'll approach it now. And part of me hopes I never have to go against Black nihilism again. But
yeah, but like you said, it's, now you've grown from it. I think that's a really way to kind of take accountability too and understand your weak points, So that's really cool. Actually, I'm glad you brought up Afrofuturism because that kind of got me thinking. One of the things that I haven't really asked about yet, which is a major component of debate, is research, right? I'm not sure if you were familiar with Afrofuturism when you had to go up against that, but now that you know about it and can apply it in that argument, what's the process to getting there, right? Because when I was doing my research again, like it just seemed like you have to know about a bunch of topics, like already.
Yeah. Okay. So research. So it depends on your debate, which debate style you're in. But policy debate, it may take a few months to prepare, to get all the facts that you possibly need or all the questions that you think you could possibly get asked. So in policy world, like in college debate, they tell you the topic in maybe June. And so your first competition's in September. So you have 3 months to research everything you can about that policy and get yourself acquainted. Now, you're allowed to have these evidence and facts with you. Like you can bring 50 articles with you to the debate. You can bring all these evidence and articles or authors that you want to have with you if you want. But with research, it comes, it's all about prioritizing research, right? Get a basic understanding of what you're trying to get across. Basic policy, basic understanding of questions of the field or the thing you want to do. Then you start thinking research-wise, what would I say to me in response? And you start asking, what would my friend say to me in response? What would my coach say to me in response? And that leads you down your research hole of like, I know where to go next. I know where to go next. All things of that kind of nature. And so research is daunting. I would say it takes time to prepare and things of that nature, but it's kind of self-leading. Once you start, the path makes itself open to you for debate because you're prepping, knowing that someone else is going to try to answer you. And if you don't know what their answer would be, you can always ask someone else. You can always do a Google search of like, what's the most popular opposition, or like, what are Democrats saying? What are Republicans saying? What are libertarians saying? It's always self-leading. I remember, I can always tell you the longest I prepared for a debate probably was like 2 months. The shortest I prepared for was a week. And so you're sitting, and the information in that regard was always about research prioritization, thinking about where to research, what paths you want to research. And also how fun you have researching the topic, right? Like this could be a topic that sucks. It's not could be something you're interested in with competitive debate. Sometimes I got a topic, I'm like, why we're doing this? I don't understand the benefits. And so part of research is always enjoying it because you'll get curious. You want to follow the Wikipedia link to the next page of like, oh, this is what that means. Or for example, when I was trying to figure out Black nihilism, you start learning about different philosophies that people have about African Americans. So you learn about Afrofuturism, you learn about critical race, you learn about what is the other one? Not Black pessimism. It's it's not. It's called Black what's it called? Black Hobbesism, like Black Hobbesianism. But you start learning about different philosophies, and you're like, oh wow. And you start learning about how people research them. Like the reason I actually know about like critical race theory and period was because of debate. I learned about it in undergrad, funny enough, because we have what we call the Derek Bell debates at the University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And Derek Bell, as people may know, is considered one of the fathers of critical race theory. And so that's how I ultimately got introduced, because he went to Pitt. Pitt wants us to look into like what Derek Bell did. And you start learning his history and about what he thought about the civil rights movement and things of that nature, and how critical race scholars have just blossomed from there. So it's always down, as you would say, research is always just go down the rabbit hole, but the rabbit hole is, to me, scary. It's always about what tunnel do I want to go through next after I go through the first hole? You know what I mean?
Interesting. So we've talked about kind of the styles of debate, research, kind of building your argument, working with a team. So all of these things, right? And especially like allowing yourself, I think that would be the hard part for me, like you said, just allowing yourself to grow after, being faced with the argument that maybe you hadn't thought of before. But all of these things really, did this come naturally to you or did you have to work on it?
I definitely had to work on it. I'm to say, even how I speak and my speaking style, I have to work on it over the years. So, like, I remember I told you I started in high school, and I just remember just reading everything. I remember just saying, these are the facts, this is all I have, and closing for there. I didn't add flair. I'm like, this man said that this is good. This man also said it was good, so therefore it is good. And I remember that. And so after a while, you just kind of grow with debate of, like, okay, how do I make this sound more persuasive? Okay, out of all these 50 pieces of paper I have, which one is the most interesting to people to hear or like catch on to? And so you start to learn after you do a few debate rounds or you put yourself in that nature. Now, for those who aren't in a competitive environment, let's say you do lay debate with a friend. And I even have those all the time in law school. Like, let's say I just want to argue over politics about, who should be the next president of the United States or things of that nature, right? Lay debate is kind of the same formation, right? You're thinking of all right, I like Joe Biden because, he's a Democrat and they're going to be like, Democrats do these things. And so you go back and you start doing research on his policies and things of that nature, or like who he's willing to support. And you keep growing from there. And then you'll run into someone else who says, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about his stance on Afghanistan right now, or what he's doing with Afghanistan? And you're going to go back and you're going to go back to looking about learning about Afghanistan, how Afghanistan happened, who is the Taliban? You're going to start looking into these things just casually. And that you learn through debate just by, just engaging with it. Be willing to open yourself to minds. If not, be willing to challenge someone, be willing to put yourself in a little bit of a conflict with someone with an opposing view and see where that puts you. See how that makes you grow.
Interesting. Okay. So all that's kind of like laid out. And I want to talk about a little bit more about like your competition experiences. So, kind of basic question, but I think it's important to hear. What was your favorite, debate that you've ever done?
My favorite debate? Oh, that's a hard one.
Too many or like too? No.
I would say too many. I think I have some, or like there's a lot they start to meld together a little bit. I would say my city debate, I think it was the graffiti one, which you were at, was a fun one for me.
Wait, graffiti?
Was your debate? Oh, okay. Maybe your city debate.
Yeah, because I just read the article again. It was like corporate tax.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Something like that. Should we tax?
So I think, well, then that makes it easy. So one of my favorite debates I've ever had, the topic was actually Pittsburgh related. Should the city of Pittsburgh create a graffiti allowable zone, a graffiti permitted zone for artists to use their art, for people to be commissioned for their art, so that Pittsburgh, should that be allowed? Should Pittsburgh allow graffiti like New York does in their subway tunnels or per se, or things of that nature? Should Pittsburgh allow that to happen? And the fun debate to me was like, you think graffiti's like this small, thing of like, well, it's automatically vandalism or it doesn't look good. But I start learning about graffiti and like, well, the benefit it gives to artists, it's cathartic for people to be able to put their art somewhere in public view for people. What graffiti adds to the community. Sometimes it tells a story of their history. Sometimes it tells about their character. And so that debate itself was fun for me because I remember being with my partner and I had some very fun lines in there of like, if kids are allowed to finger paint, why can't people be allowed to spray paint? And, I remember having fun with that topic because it's very personable. It's very easy to be affected by what graffiti does in your backyard. And so to me, that was the fun debate. And I think one debate, I think I mentioned it earlier, I have fun with, it was more moral debate of, well, is civil disobedience justified in all instances, right? Is blocking the highway, per se, justified? Is it, and if they're protesting police brutality or things of that nature? And I remember this one because this debate competition took me to the French embassy. Because the reason this debate actually happened is that the French wanted to come to the US to explore the topic because they have in their history a system or like incidents of civil disobedience in their past. And one time it involved students throwing rocks at the police because they were upset about how the school was treating labor conditions there at the school. And so they brought all their history examples here to the US and brought it and presented to all the US debate teams and said, come to the French embassy, please talk about this so that we can learn or we can, grow from it or like understand the debate or the sides of it all. And to me, that was so fascinating because it changed my idea of civil disobedience morality. And that put me ahead of the time for some conversations we have in the political sphere. When the Black Lives protests were happening, they're like, these are riots, these are unjustified or things of that nature. There's destruction. Well, in these debates, in the French embassy, we had to ask, right, is violence necessary? Sometimes for civil disobedience. Is it necessary for change? And part of me, and so how I've grown for this kind of conversation, and then this also relates to some of my experiences from other past debates, is that in most successful civil rights movements, there's always a boogeyman. And there's always somebody that people are afraid of the rioting or the aggressive party in order to get things changed. And so, for example, for America, for example, the civil rights movement, we love Martin Luther King, we love his non-civil, his non-violent civil disobedience, his ways of not choosing to do things and riot. But then we forget about the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers pushed white moderates because they were scared of them and went to MLK for their nonviolence because they liked that more. And so you think about, well, that contributed to the whole overarching scheme of the civil rights movement. Things got pushed because somebody was scary. Somebody was threatening violence. And so you think about those. And so in my mind, in the end of that debate topic is like, was that justified? And now thinking back, I'm like, to me, it may have been. I don't want to condone violence. I don't want to, but like in the end of the day, it pushed things for that movement that we needed happen, social change that we needed to happen. And so, and that put me ahead of the debate, like I told you, in politics, of the riots, of the looting. Is looting justified? Should looting be okay? I was ahead of that circle 2 years ago before it even occurred. I was aware of the topics and the narrative and came to my decision. And modern people aren't even sure where they stand yet now, right? If there was something like that to happen again, or, more Black Lives protests were to happen in force like they did when George Floyd was murdered, what is your position now, right? What is it justified? And and some people are not ready to reckon with that topic, while people like me have had to because of debate, because of who I've had to talk to and the experience I've gone to, and who I've met along the way.
Right. Okay. Talk about losing. All right. So you learned all this stuff, you go in, and you lose. And it's like, I just gathered all this great information. I just gave a great argument, or maybe I didn't give a great argument, but still I imparted some good information. I've learned some things along the way, but now I lose. Like, how important is that to you? Like, does it really take a toll
to win
on
or to lose? I would say at the time, I'm a little competitive, so it was important for me to win. I felt it necessary. It made me feel good to feel like my arguments validated or persuaded somebody, a judge or the crowd, if they're there as a public debate or things of that nature. But once you go, since I'm now in the same way in law school, it's the same kind of fashion of like, now for me in law school, in like trials, the stakes are higher. This is someone's either wallet or someone's life. And so for me, it's kind of like, now I'm forced to be competitive because I have these high of stakes for someone else. And so it's prepped me for that. Now, even if I didn't do law, right? It would have, I don't think, when I don't have any trials or cases before me, and just casual conversations or casual debates, I wouldn't say winning isn't that much of a matter to me. It's more about growth to me now when it's a casual debate. It's more about where do we go from here? What is the takeaways from our conversation? And as a person, I value debate. I love debate. I think it's had a great impact on who I am today. All my successes today, from best oralist here in the law school to like other fashions, it's given me the tools over the course of time to be able to present what I think and what I believe, or to the best way that I possibly can. And so for me, debate's cool, I guess.
Cool. So debate's cool, and everything that comes with it, I guess, is cool. Even the losing.
It also takes you to fun places. Let's say you get good at debate, right? You go to political debates across the country. Candace Owen is notorious for this. Charlie Kirk, all kind of political commentators travel to conventions and to conferences or to business meetings and have debates in front of them. And for me in undergrad, that was the same. I never flew before. I had never flown before until I did debate. And so it has taken me to, for example, to DC, like I told you, the French embassy, or to George, or to universities there. It's taken me to Atlanta for conventions, or to Emory. It's taken me to Virginia. It's taken me to places, I would normally have gone if it wasn't for I was being invited to speak or for debates or things of that nature. So being presentable about your ideas, or learning how to do them in an effective manner is really great. And so even if you don't do debate, you don't have to make it a debate where you need another person to compete against. It helps you just prep for speaking engagements, to talk about your dissertation, to talk about your new book, to talk about just different things you're like as a pastor or your preacher, your profession. It helps you prepare for that. And so if you want to get paid for speaking engagement, or go different places to travel to speak on panels or symposiums or, press releases, it helps kind of prep you for that, because now you understand what an audience wants to hear from your side and how you are most persuasive. Because if you can predict what counter arguments they're saying when you're speaking to them at your engagement, you are 10 times more persuasive than them than not.
Nice. I'm glad you brought up that you were the best oralist in the school, because I saw that in my research. So everyone, Aaron won best oralist at your virtual, is it Fornoff?
Yeah, Fornoff, you got it right. It's
advocacy competition. So and I was going to ask you, did debate help with that? Clearly it did. So that's very cool. So what did you talk about with that?
So for the Fornoff competition, that's more law related. But the conversation, or that competition, was about the Federal Housing Act law. So the Federal Housing Act, just to give you a gist, basically says landlords can't discriminate based on protected class, race, gender, sexuality, things of that nature. So one thing that we as lawyers find out over the course of law school, or law students, is that the law has not filled in a lot of the gaps. So in this competition, the question was, okay, so if a landlord can't discriminate you when they sell it, advertise for the home, well, what happens after you already got the key, right? Let's say you have a tenant that's racist to you. One of your roommates, one of your neighbors, is just racist to you. What does a landlord have to do? What is their duty to change? Is it to tell the tenant to stop being racist? Is it to tell him to change the lease? Is it to change the handbook? What should a landlord legally do? And that was that whole competition about. And some people don't think about that, right? Okay, what if the landlord did? One of the examples in the law that a case that randomly happened is there's this guy who, got the keys, was renting his apartment, and then randomly a burning cross was outside his door, outside his apartment. And you're sitting there like, well, what does a landlord have a responsibility for that? And you're thinking, well, and so it becomes a debate. Well, maybe yes, because it's the landlord and it's technically still their land, or no, because, well, I can't control who puts a cross on my lawn, and a landlord can't. And so that was what the competition was about. And I was more of because of the competition, you switch ties sometimes, but most times I was of the competition, or of the position that the landlord should be liable. right? For harassment that happens after you give them the key. Legally, they should be, because they probably have the more control over the land than the tenant does. And, you make these arguments between a judge and between law professors almost, and, you go from there. But that was what that competition was about. And somehow I did well.
Nice, nice. And so how does law school help you flex the debate muscles? Of course, there's this competition, but when you're interacting with your peers, are you a part of a debate team? Is that even a thing in law school?
So law school doesn't necessarily have a debate team, because ultimately every litigation, or those who want to be trial attorneys like myself, will ultimately debate a debate of facts of, like, did he kill her? Well, allowed to say, should he pay damages for, suit for hitting him with his car? It's always going to be ultimately a debate in law. But I would say it does prep you a little bit, because of how you think. Now, I will say how I differ from my other law classmates because of my debate experience and that nature is how I process arguments and how I write my arguments. So because of debate, I see things as what we call it a flow in debate world. So I see their argument. One argument is right here. This is their argument. Okay. This is their argument. The flow guns goes, all right, how does this go? What do I need to block it? What do I need to stop their argument from going down the train to win? And so, in law, it's the same way. What facts do I need to put into question in order to say that, oh, well, maybe there's a doubt of this should happen? And so the flow keeps going, even from first. So it's like, okay, they make their first argument. I put something up to block it. And so I block them. What do they do to breach me, right? What do they do to push forward? And so I see things in steps of arguments and things of that nature. How do we progress? As my debate coach likes to say, or used to say, arguments are like ships in the water, right? The best arguments that are the ones that are going to clash in the ocean, the ones that are going to show who's about to win. The arguments that are weaker are when the two boats just pass each other in the middle of the night. If we both say something and they have nothing to do with each other or no way to dispute each other, then there's no point in the clash. And so that's how I defer in my law classmates, and how I differ in how I write is because now in law school and in this profession of law, they expect you to be fancy lawyer talk in profession of like, do this or Latin phrase here and add these fancy words to make it seem more sophisticated and more convincing. And for some judges and for some people, that doesn't work. They just think that's just big talk jargon.
Yeah.
And so my writing style is literally how I talk. I write literally how I speak. I put sometimes in colloquial terms, maybe some, little times of slang here and there. But for all my judges and all my professors I've ever had, to them, I have most persuasive papers, or one of the most persuasive papers, because I put things clear and concise and how the argument goes. And for debate, that was the same way. I need to say these things clear, concisely, so I don't lose your attention span and go from there.
Nice. Okay, a little bit of switching gears,
but
my focus is media studies, right? And so I'm always interested in how media interacts with, the rest of the world. Media is everywhere. Media are everywhere. So I was interested in media portrayals of debate, right? So you think of a movie like The Great Debaters, or you think of shows that, of course, involve debate, like, any law show ever, Law and Order, How to Get Away with Murder, all that kind of stuff. Do you think that media do a good job in depicting the realities of debating?
I think in some ways it does. Some are off. I think some are off, some are on point. For example, I think there's a Netflix movie called Candy Jar that shows high school debate and what it looks like.
Wait, repeat that?
I think it's called Candy Jar. I think I have to look it up.
Candy Jar.
But with that, and so it is a good thing about, so what you're saying, great debate, it's not always these grandiose moments of like, this is the thing that won the debate. This is, or this is the phrase that's sold it for me. But I think media portrayals of debate are very interesting, and depending on what wanted to say or how to go. But I think the media is right that debate has power. Like, everyone puts this grandiose so that debate has prestige. I think it has that power and prestige to change the world. I think it does. I think in actuality, I don't think they understand the emotional appeals of debate, right? How it affects the debaters on the stage and things of that nature. They expect all debaters to be this calm, staunch, Denzel Washington kind of characters, or like their students of they can just handle this and they're most composed. Now, all debate styles are not like that, right? Some are not composed, some are not staunch, some are not calculated. And because of that, debate seems off. When you see a different debate with a different style, you're like, wow, this may be a more passionate than I thought it was, or more flippant than you think it was. But debate will always depend on the people who's having a conversation. And media doesn't necessarily show that. It just shows you like they had this meeting at this big Harvard Law School tournament or Harvard tournament. They said some words, they win the prize. And debate is more of a longer conversation that pulls on you more than it is an ultimate victory.
Got it. So I've been itching to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to know. I think this is the question that started it all. So when people are on Twitter, I don't know, are you on Twitter?
I am not, but I get enough updates from people. It's fine.
Okay. Any social media platform, really.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider the back and forth that people have on social media platforms to be debate, or is it just going back and forth for the sake of going back and forth?
I would consider it debate. Now, in some forms, sometimes it's constructive. Other times, I don't think so, right? Because of social media and the anonymity, or the not, I don't think so. The undisclosure of it all. There you go. There you go. That's the way I would say it. That people are more staunch with their arguments or willing to say these things. And with social media also nowadays, people are more willing to make the more radical arguments. They're willing to say things that most normally, acceptable people in a room probably wouldn't accept. And so I think social media has the power to create good debate. I think because social media also lacks structure of what debate looks like, is completely, I think, sometimes unproductive, right? Sometimes, people throw in personal attacks in there, right? Because that's how they feel debate should go. And most times in like my debate world, that wasn't structured. We didn't usually go that plan. That wasn't the norm. That wasn't the plan. And so because social media, debate rules are off. There are no norms on how we should discuss things with each other, right? We can do it in a meme. We can do it through, arguing and yelling at each other. It could be just calling each other stupid. There are no norms to how we discuss on social media. Now, I mean, that's a problem for the publisher and how they want things to be policed and things of that nature. But I would still say, ultimately, social media is debate. It's a forum of debate. It is, as some people call it, the modern town square. But the modern town square, they still had norms of how they would do things. Here, the modern town square is like anyone can pick up a tomato, throw it at somebody, and there are no repercussions because we don't know who threw the tomato. So
that makes sense. Okay. That was something else I was going to ask you. Okay, so we talked about different styles and stuff like that. Is that restricting? Like having to follow a set of rules if you really want to get passionate about something, if like something really rubbed you the wrong way and you want to say something, can something get you disqualified? Yeah, talk about that.
So only few things get you disqualified. Honestly, it's about points and competition and stylistically. So you're not necessarily in debate, you're not necessarily restricted in how you present this form. It's always the rules usually in debate are how it is formatted, right? debate chooses who speaks first, who gets to ask questions first. It kind of structures you in the competitions, how they do things about, all right, who does what, when, and what, and how. But what happens in your time is necessarily mostly your time. You can put it how you want it to be. You can make it a rant like I did, like I told you in one of my debate rounds. You can make it a performance if you want to. You have all rights to express how you want to in your time. But other than that, the question is for debate is like, try not to interrupt the other person's time. And that's what social media isn't also about, right? Social media doesn't force you to sit there and listen to someone. It doesn't force you to like read their comments or read their tweets. You can always block them. You can always sit. But like in a debate setting, you have to sit there from 7 minutes and either process what they're saying or longer, process what they're saying, or try to figure out what you're going to respond to them. And so that changes ultimately the flow of how debate will go because you are forced to listen. And like, as I hate to bring this example, in like the Trump versus Biden debate, there wasn't really in the first, like the bad one we know we're talking about, where they interrupt each other all the time. They really weren't forced to listen to each other. They didn't cut mics off. They didn't have to sit there and be quiet. Their point was just, I want to say this thing. I want to cut you off, and things of that nature. In a debate format, a more structured debate, that's not necessarily allowed. What happens actually in most structured formats is you wanted to interrupt your opponent, you would raise your hand, and then they would have 30 seconds to finish their thoughts. Then you go, right? And so that gives me a chance to interrupt their flow because they're like, what is he about to say? Things of that nature or something like that. But it isn't like you're wrong or, I want to cut you off. It isn't anything of like rudeness. Now, in casual debates, there's no structure to that either. When you're at a debate with your friend or a colleague, there's no structured debate to that either. Now, how it's done, professionally or between yourselves as friends determines how the debate will go. If it's just becomes a screaming match of you interrupting each other about what about this thing, what about this thing, I don't think it's constructive for both of you. But, if you're willing to take the time and be like, maybe not even police it, you could just be like, let him finish his thought, then you go, and then he goes, or things of that nature. I think that's constructive.
Interesting. Wow. Well, okay, wait. I feel like I've never seen anybody cuss during a debate, though.
Well, you should have seen my debate coaches. They were sailors. I mean, they can. I mean, okay. The problem is it's a strategic decision, right? I've seen them in my competitor rounds with debaters curse because they want to jar you, right? But if I'm in a public, like if I'm in a room with older people, like I think cursing would turn them off to my arguments or turn them off to what I'm saying, so I won't curse. Or some people, have the morality where cursing turns them off. Others, that's their eye catcher. They're like, wow, he said so to me, it's a strategic decision of any person who's debating. So, it's just about like, what is the goal here? Do you want that staunch to it? Do you want that oomph? As we call it, that cortisol, if you want on it. Or do you want it to be like, or do you rather not? And would you say, I want to take it a more professional tone, a professional way? And each speaker could be of different things. I've seen debates where they're completely far. I have this big professional person speaking, and then I have this very casual, some person like a sailor person, and how their styles clash with each other based on what they're saying even affects you because you're sitting there trying to figure out, well, he's saying it like this. And to me, that's kind of cool. But then he puts it down to earth. And so how you process it and how people want to take in their information also affects how you understand it or how you take away from it.
Very interesting. So what have we learned? And by we, I mean me. I've learned a lot. So just the different styles. I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of giving me a sigh of relief for everyone who's ever debated is, to me, on the outside, and maybe that's just a result of looking at different media, it seemed very restrictive. But what you're saying is you have a lot of room to be yourself. which I think is really cool. And the ways that you learn about information can vary as well. Have you ever interviewed anyone for research purposes?
For debate purposes?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say yes. I think twice I have. One of them was a professor in the Department of Communications about I think what is the topic? Oh, I think it was about I remember what is the benefits of debate? I remember they did interviews of that because sometimes in the debate round we make the argument that for competition that well your arguments aren't good for education, right? I don't think that what you're saying, right, is good for everyone to learn here because you're cutting off certain things or certain styles or certain ways. For example, the performative debate, I can make the argument of like, if you gave a performance debate, if you went with a play, or if you read a script, or you read a monologue, which I've seen happen, one argument I'm free to make in all debate rounds, even casually, is like, well, I don't learn from that necessarily in the best way. I came to this debate tournament or the debate round to learn through policy and things of that way. And so by you reading this monologue with all your points, I'm not getting my best education. And for that, judge, I should win this round. And you're like, oh. And so I remember interviewing my comm professor for some cards of that nature of like, what are the benefits of this style versus this style? Or in high school debate, what they're taught, which I think is wild now that I'm a law school, is to say everything quickly. So to speak fast, because in debate and even modern times, you're given a certain amount of time. You're given 10 minutes to make all your points. Well, I don't want to miss any points. So in high school, they're taught to go super fast with everything. I mean, speed read, almost like you think they're like jumbling their words, but it's like they're reading like a bot that's on fast forward, like they're on a video on fast forward almost. And they're taught and trained to learn or to debate that way. So when I got to college, that is a style I had to break because in my mind, talking fast wasn't as important about how I made it sound. Like what word choices I wanted to use, things of that nature. I wanted to focus on the word choices than saying everything that I needed to say. Get it all out, verb vomit, everything I wanted to say. And so I think it just, I forgot your question, but.
No, it was just, did you ever interview anyone?
Yeah, but I did it. Yeah, but yeah, I did.
That's what you're going to do about. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I think at Pitt, we had because I started off as a comm major. And I switched over to English writing because I didn't because at Pitt, the comm degree is like rhetoric. And
it's more speech related, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was just like, but I took the argument class at Pitt, which was uncomfortable for me. So that's why I took it. And it's like, okay, some of the stuff that you're saying was kind of reiterated in there, but I feel like this discussion gave me a lot bigger of a perspective of the benefits of, going back and forth and having debate. So this is really cool. Appreciate taking the time to do this. I guess my final question would be if you could sum it all up for a skeptic like me. What would you tell somebody who's a little skeptical or nervous about debating, whether it's like casually or if they kind of want to try it out formally, but are a little nervous about it?
I would say, my takeaway or, my beginner's tip for anybody who's interested, in just trying to debate with their friend or family is just like, take it slow. You don't have to make it a scream match. You don't have to sound like the smartest person in the world when you start with that. You can always start with just the basic knowledge that you currently have, right? You can always debate with your mom about what to eat today because that's small. That doesn't low risk, right? I want to go to Chipotle and she's like, well, I ate Chipotle yesterday. That's a debate. That's a kind argument or conversation. And you can provide the argument that, well, we had chicken Chipotle bowls yesterday. We can try steak ones. And so that's argument. That's discourse. That's debate. And so always start slow, and it doesn't have to be this big, grandiose stage you think of. Just think about the small things you want to think about. Think about the things you want to change. Think about the small disagreements. Because once you start handling small disagreements between people, between friends, between colleagues, you can start doing bigger debate topics about like your dissertation or your academic career or even your professional career, you can start going bigger.
Nice. Great advice. Great advice. I'll have to implement that as well. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to add about?
Anything else that I wanted to talk about? I would say, I think we touched on everything or found a way to mention everything. But if any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm literally available to anyone at all times.
Nice. Is there anything you want to plug, like besides your article? Anything
I mean, I could plug my article. Give me 1 year, I'll plug my business card, my legal attorney card. But
very cool.
Right now,
what kind of lawyer do you want to be?
I think I'm interested in being, I told you, a trial attorney, so I want to be in courtroom more than anything, but I think I'm interested in doing criminal or family law work. I think criminal law, one, it's more, I think to me, more exciting, a little more fun. Also, I have you learn more about the system when you're, a lawyer in it, because, you learn about, how do they talk to the defendants? What are they presented with? What knowledge do normal people know about getting a charge, right? What do normal people know about getting a traffic ticket? They just know they get this thing and then maybe pay it later in the mail or like appear in court somewhere. And so you start learning about what are the gaps in criminal law and what people do or do not know, and how you can either help educate people or defend people from, being abused by the system. Or, my goal maybe is to be a criminal prosecutor, but more progressive criminal prosecutor, because I think who chooses what charges are put on people is a more powerful decision than who defends them, right? I think if I can choose how many people get a small time drug offense or a one-time drug offense versus defending them versus it, is a much powerful component of the criminal system in people's lives than, trying to get them a lawyer that hopefully can get them out of the charge. I think if I can throw away, if they have a pot of weed or like an ounce of it all, I'm willing to throw it away. And I think other prosecutors and more people who are becoming young prosecutors are willing to do the same thing. And that's the power of a prosecutor. Who picks the charges? Who does what? Right? Breonna Taylor's cops are not charged because their prosecutor said no. That is the impact of who picks what goes through. And so I think I do better for the system or people overall if I can pick who gets what and how much we can dedicate to it.
Now that's a very interesting stance. And I only say that because I know a lot of people, in, I'm going to say the Black community.
Yeah, no problem. People of color, I know.
Yeah, we're very suspicious of prosecutors. I mean, I think of Kamala Harris, and people just, no.
Yeah.
She's a prosecutor, no. She's a Fed.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to me. I never heard that perspective, but I see where you're coming from. But I have to sit with that a little bit because I don't know.
I know. I mean, I can't, there's a distrust of the system, period. I mean, I can't get rid of prosecutors being the ops because they are the ops. They work with the cops all the time. I can't discredit that. But the question is becomes, who do you want fighting for you on the inside, right? Who do you want to help you fight the system and how it changes? And even if the system's broken, right? If you believe the system is beyond repair, right? Who's in the best fit to help repair? Who is in the best fit to dismantle it? Who's in the best fit to charge cops? Who's in the best fit to charge corrupt politicians? Who is in the best position to do things? And that's a prosecutor who has their heart and mind in the right place. And I get it. I completely understand Black prosecutors, but sometimes we're the only limit of a prosecutor, really, but legally, is the laws you give us, right? If people say they want to prosecute drug cases more, well, I'm motivated by you all to do that certain thing. And that's what happened with Kamala Harris and things of that nature. She was motivated by people above her, her governor, things of that nature, or the people in their sentiment to prosecute more things than she should have at the time. Now we're looking back and we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't have done it as much as we told her to. And so that becomes an issue of prosecution, but it's again, prosecution and how we look at charges and crimes will always defer depending on time and what we look at in hindsight.
So do you think you'd be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? To stand up for yourself if you don't want to prosecute? People are pushing you from the top. Do you think you'd be able to?
That depends on your office. If you're in some prosecutors' offices are like, it's either get to the program or not at all. Others allow more independent decisions. For example, one notorious for being a stickler is New York. New York has too many cases for them to like have freelances according to them. So they like things a certain way and a certain function. Other places, like for example, I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is literally the feds, literally the federal prosecutors. And they have more leeway in how they do things and how they function, even though the president is technically our boss and how they want to do things. But we have more leeway in what gets prosecuted, or they have more leeway in what gets prosecuted and pushed forward. So in that regard, it depends, where it is in the culture of that time. And if you want to change the culture, you can always run. You can always go to the top. And we also need to change the perception that prosecutors need to be hard on crime to be good. I think there are so many people and of this nature of the community, even in the African-American community, that the only way to be a good cop, the only way to be a good prosecutor, the only way to do good criminal defense work is to be tough on crime. Even judges, tough on crime. That's what wins mostly a lot of elections recently. If a prosecutor or a judge say, be tough on crime, then we're tough on crime. And so that affects the people who are charged. And so I think we as a community need to look at, what do we want the criminal justice system to do? Do we want it to be tough? Do we want it to be rehabilitative? Do we want it to be like, if I catch you with pot, if I catch you with cocaine, I'm going to give you the full extent of the book. We need to, as people, need to think about what is our system of crime, or as the criminal justice system does, and what we want it to look like. Because for years, our parents wanted it to be tough. As recently as the 90s, all of our generations just before us wanted it to be tough. And now we see the extent of mass incarceration, sentence disparities, all of these things, because we were all motivated at the time to be hard on crime. And so I don't want to convince people, well, I want a safe neighborhood. I want to believe that crime will be punished. Crime will be punished, ladies and gentlemen. The question is, what happens to the offender? I know. And so
a lot to think about. Interesting.
I'm here for my deep talks. I'm always here for them.
I might have to come back and debate you.
Oh, there you go.
Now that I know the secrets now. I talked for like an hour and a half, now I know. Well, this was very interesting. And I appreciate you like sticking with me this long. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording